Now we're going to get stuck straight into this. All right, so what do we have here? Andrews wants permanent pandemic legislation. That's right. It's really no secret. It's been widely reported on that Daniel Andrews, in collaboration with the crossbenchers here in Victoria from the Legislative Council, are in negotiations, whatever that means, right, in relation to permanently extending pandemic legislation, state of emergency. I mean, when I hear about this type of extension, all this really means to me is that our freedoms are going to be further trampled on, and more power will be consolidated in the state, power to dictate over our lives and to implement arbitrary rules that you and I know have been based largely on pseudoscience at best. All right, so Daniel Andrews has made no bones about it. He says, we don't know when everything can be open for everyone. He has made it absolutely clear that those who refuse to get injected will be punished, but he's also made it clear that restrictions may very well remain for those who receive the injections, or even those who receive a third injection. Or if we look at Israel, we see some people are just about up to their fifth dose of this provisionally approved experimental vaccine and are still subjected to inhumane policy of the government, restrictions, social distancing, travel limits, density limits, where you can go, where you can't go. So the people of Israel thought they had some sort of roadmap to freedom, and the people of Israel are absolutely experiencing some of the most onerous restrictions out of anywhere in the world, and they're producing huge amounts of positive test results, positive PCR test results, and experiencing many hospitalizations. And we're talking about a population that has received close to 85% of at least double injected or more. So how could this be, ladies and gentlemen? Maybe you can ask your pro-Daniel Andrews friends or your pro-emergency lockdown friends around the dinner table, if this vaccine is truly the road to health, safety, and freedom, why is Israel in such a terrible situation? And it's not isolated to Israel. There's other countries around the world that have very high dosage rates of this injection. For example, Singapore, a very compliant country, they said, listen, whatever you say, government, we'll do it because we're compliant. Same thing in Singapore. You see all of these positive cases, hospitalizations, and the re-implementation of authoritarian directions that you and I know severely impact our basic capacity to live our lives and to live with what should only be our right to God-given rights and freedom. Okay? We see these emergency powers exploited by people to the likes of Daniel Andrews as a means of what I would describe as him carrying out his authoritarian ambitions. It's been no secret with Daniel Andrews. The writing has been on the wall for a very long time. Since the inception of his tenure as Premier, it's really important to remember this. Daniel Andrews wasted no time spending our tax money, running off to China time and time again to engage in secretive meetings with the Chinese Communist Party, meetings of a foreign policy nature that heavily tilted in favor of Beijing, mind you, and had the absolute potential to undermine our industry, to invite tyrannical actors into our backyard. Daniel Andrews said, I don't need permission from the federal government. I don't need to consult the people of Victoria, the people that pay my bills. He said, I'm Daniel Andrews. This is what I want to do. And he went and made it happen. Now, he respects very much the senior members of the Chinese Communist Party. He's made no bones about it. And what I'm proposing is that Daniel Andrews seeks to implement a Chinese Communist Party-esque system of governance here in Victoria, and we have every reason to believe so. Anyway, I have a small clip here that was produced by The Real Rukshan detailing some of the demands of Daniel Andrews, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. The only thing the Premier of Victoria, Daniel Andrews, is worthy of is being ignored. I'm going to play the clip for you right now.
Like, why would you just get the system going? Why would you have the thing up and running and then essentially pull all that down, pull all the architecture that you built, all the infrastructure that you built, the culture that you've changed. Why would you change that 4 or 5 weeks later? We will not be doing that here. I'm not going to say to someone, oh, look, just wait us out, will you? Just wait 4 or 5 weeks and then you'll be able to go to the pub. No. If you make the judgment to not get vaccinated and you reckon you can wait out us or the publican or whoever you want to think you're waiting out, you won't wait out the virus, because the virus will be here for a long time and your only protection against it is being vaccinated. This will be well into 2022. Well and truly into 2022. Then we're going to get into booster issue, so it won't be your first and second dose. It'll be have you had your third, and then the other issue will be, well, who knows what variant's coming? Who knows? Like, we don't. So we've got every reason to be confident. We've got every reason to be optimistic and upbeat. The Victorians have done an amazing job, but that job includes us making some difficult decisions, and that's to keep people who are not vaccinated out of some of those venues that we've been talking about today.
So how long do you foresee
I can't put a date on it. I cannot put a date on it, but I can tell you this: it will not be when we reach 90%. It will not be, anytime soon. That's going to function for a period of time well into 2022.
There's been reports that there's been thousands.
For instance, I'll give you an example. The Grand Prix is in April. I don't think there's going to be crowds at the Grand Prix made up of people who have not been double dosed. Just to give you a time frame. Doesn't mean it'll end the day after the Grand Prix, but that just gives you some sense. Please don't play that game of let's just wait them out and then we'll be able to do everything we want to do and have not got jabbed. No, that will not be the case here. And if you make that choice, it'll be a very long wait and you won't outwait this virus. If you're not vaccinated, you'll get it and you've got every chance of becoming very...
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. He makes no bones about it. Even if you're double injected, triple injected, there's still no guarantees that you'll actually get your freedom back. And by the way, never forget, the government has no business dictating what our freedom is. Remember, they're supposed to serve us. All right, so this is my opinion. Victoria will become a permanent dictatorship unless Victorians rise up. In my opinion, this is a simple matter of fact. Daniel Andrews, in his capacity as Premier, has been effectively able to shut down Parliament. We know that when these directions that are supposedly for our health are cooked up, we know that it's really made up by a small group of people in a room deciding what Victorians can and can't do. We know there's zero oversight, zero debate, zero input from the public. Those directions are cooked up by a bunch of people relying on pseudoscience and then enforced by a police force that's willing to get very violent. And I know this same model is transpiring all around the world. We need oversight in this country. We need a true independent oversight committee to review everything this government has done. But Daniel Andrews, he doesn't want that. He likes the power. He hides behind the fake experts or experts that are handpicked by him and those like him in order to implement whichever policy he feels is in his interest to implement. All right, so there were a few interesting things that Daniel Andrews spoke in that little clip that I just played. So there is so much to unpack in that minute and a bit. So let's just get started. Here's what he said. He said, culture that you've changed. Okay, so first of all, this is culture that Daniel Andrews has advanced, that he has advocated for, and it's a type of culture that falls in line with his worldview. It is not an Australian culture. It is a culture of top-down government control, big government, and mass obedience and compliance. It is a culture reminiscent of the culture created in China by the Chinese Communist Party. So what Daniel Andrews is trying to convince the population of is a change in culture that's positive, but actually it's authoritarian, okay? All right, here's something else. He said, you won't wait out the virus because the virus will be here for a long time. All right, so maybe you've got some friends that start repeating Daniel Andrews and they say, well, we got to do what the government says because the virus is going to be here for a long time. Well, guess what? Viruses have existed since the dawn of human existence, and they will always exist, and there is no getting rid of viruses. Of course, last year, we saw the supposedly novel coronavirus. In other years, we've seen other viruses that created more havoc and more damage, but we didn't freak out about it. So, yes, indeed, viruses will be around forever. But what Daniel Andrews is implying here to the Victorian public is that this is something that we need to be scared of, okay? Daniel Andrews uses fear as his best friend. Compliance is commanded by fear, at least with Daniel Andrews. A big trick to ignoring Daniel Andrews and holding the line is to not give in to fear. He will backtrack on many things that he puts out there. Okay, a lot of the time Daniel Andrews is bluffing about the types of measures that he proclaims he has the capability to implement. All right, so yes, the virus will be here for a long time, but should anybody be concerned about it? Well, how about we talk about the infection fatality rate of this virus for the very vast population? I'm going to do a complete segment on this, okay, because most people who are concerned about corona, they're concerned about the worst case scenario, death, right? Nobody wants to die. All right, I get it. Well, guess what? Everybody dies sometime. And it is a fact that the vast majority of people who die have comorbidities. They're at their life expectancy. But if we're talking about the true infection mortality rate, not the rubbish case fatality rate, which is based on PCR tests, from some of the most highly esteemed studies in the world, that I will present to you on MCJ Report either tomorrow night or the night after, we can state that the average infection fatality rate of this virus, on average, we're looking at between 0.002% to 1%. Okay, so all the fear mongering, if the facts were to be presented at these bloody press conferences where Daniel Andrews lies to the people, the fear would disappear from the public overnight. The truth would set us free, but the truth is being highly suppressed, all right? So you've got this clown over here, this absolute maniac, seeking control, ignoring the truth, spreading fear. All right, what else did this guy say? Your only protection against it, as in it, the virus, is being vaccinated, okay? So this is just an absolute lie. We know that. We know that people who are immunocompromised or at their life expectancy, of course, are running a risk, whether they get a coronavirus, whether they get heat stroke, whether they get a sniffle or fall down the stairs, okay? That the only protection is being vaccinated. What an absolute lying, manipulative person this man is. What about vitamin D? What about keeping a healthy diet? What about zinc? What about exercise? What about ivermectin? I mean, how is it that this man who says he's the Premier of Victoria is able to lie to the faces of 6.5 million Victorians? The only thing that can protect you is this injection. I mean, it's an absolute load of rubbish, okay? And for any of your friends and family that say, well, it's the only thing that can save us, tell them to do some homework. Tell them to stop trusting the government, turn off the television, and go for a walk in the sunshine. How about that? All right, so what else do we have here? Oh yeah, have you had your third? That's right. So for all these people that think, hey, I'm going to get my freedom back because I got double injected, well, guess what? Guess what? It's not going to end there. Daniel Andrews is pursuing an Israel strategy, okay? In Israel, the Prime Minister came out himself and he said that he actually admitted, he said, well, the Pfizer vaccine, it's not as effective against the Delta variant as we once thought, right? Because in Israel, you've got surging positive tests, hospitalizations, restrictions, everyone's double jabbed. So what was the solution in Israel to fix this problem where they said, we can't work out why people are going to hospital. We can't work out why all these injected people are getting sick. What could the problem be? It's not the vaccine, because the vaccine is what leads us to safety and freedom. The problem is people need more doses. That's right. So load them up. Dose 3, dose 4, dose 5, dose 10, dose 100. I don't see this ending unless people seriously put their foot down and say, hold on a second. We understand the infection fatality rate. We're happy to take this tiny, tiny risk. Let us live our lives and go and stick this injection somewhere else, okay? All right, so what else do we have here from this absolute grub? Who knows what variant is coming? Well, who knows what else is coming? You might walk out onto the street and get hit by a truck. We don't know. Guess what? Every year when the flu season comes around, we don't know what variant of it is, but if we get sick, we deal with it, and we're respectful, right? We stay at home. We don't want to pass the flu on to somebody else. I wouldn't think so. So again, the fear-mongering. You don't know what's next. It could be bigger and badder. It could be the Delta variant plus. All right, I actually saw that term. Apparently there's a new variant called the Delta variant plus. I mean, I think they're taking tips from Apple, iPhone Plus. It's just absolutely ridiculous. It was the Professor Tim Spector over in London who said that the Delta variant is reminiscent of a bad cold, and symptoms you can expect include, but are not limited to, a headache, sore throat, and a runny nose. Okay? Just an absolute fear-mongering maniac, Daniel Andrews, trying to convince Victorians that they need him for their health and for their safety and for their freedom. Daniel Andrews and those like him from around the world, they are the providers of sustenance. Okay? The message the government is putting out to the population is that we, the people, are not capable of surviving without them. What absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. All the employers out there of Victoria, how could you obey this absolute grub? Take your self-respect back and ignore Daniel Andrews. All right, moving along here. All right, he said, keep people who aren't vaccinated out of some of those venues. All right, so he's advocating the two-tier society. So he's willing to give a few breadcrumbs to the injected, okay? But those who don't want to be injected, you got to keep them away, because you can't just have these people roaming around spreading the virus, okay? The virus whereby the survival rate is 99 point fill in the blank, right? Fill in the blank. All right. What else do we have here? He says he can't put a date on it, as in a return to freedom, which is not his decision to make. We're Australians. We are born free. I do not obey this man. But it will not be when we reach 90%, okay? Or I suppose 100%. So even should 90% of people be double injected, there's not going to be an opening up. He's advocating for a two-tier society. And guess what? You're not in it. I'm not in it. And for those of you watching the show, if you have gotten the jab, I don't take a stand against the two-tier society. Maybe you did it for your job. I understand that. But you don't want to participate in a society where some people have privileges and benefits and others don't. I wouldn't think so. But ladies and gentlemen, I suppose my message to people out there that have gotten the jab is quite simple. How long do you want to do this for? Maybe you got coerced into it. I understand and I sympathize. But it's not going to stop here. It's not going to end. They're going to want you getting jabbed up, who knows, once, twice, 3 times a year. It's anybody's guess. Do you want to participate in this system whereby your very livelihood depends on bending at the knee to the government and taking these drugs that you know you don't need, you know you don't want, you know you never asked for them? It's really, honestly, something to think about. We have to develop a long-term strategy here. All right, so that just about wraps it up for this segment of the show. My message, loud and clear to all my fellow Victorians, Australians, and people around the world is hold the line. I think our bodily integrity is the most important thing, our dignity, our right to choose. We have an absolute civic obligation to disobey grubs like Daniel Andrews. He's a man that seeks to reshape the culture, as he referred to, right? Culture of Victorian and Australian society to one reminiscent of a society within the People's Republic of China, okay? It's just absolutely something that we can never, ever submit to.